Okay. Hi, everybody, and welcome to SA Rugby Magazine. I'm Kevin Ferguson, the Money Man. I got Rich Pickings, Gav, and Rich. Gav, let's touch on last week's games. To me, there's something awfully wrong with the Stormers right now. I can't put my finger on it. But for 4 games in a row, they've looked pretty bad.
Well, actually,
in particular, Sasha's looked devoid of anything.
Well, I think that it's actually been 4. They've lost 4 out of the last 5 games. Remember, the only game that they've won since they were thrashed by Harlequins in London back in January was the following week. They came here and they played a second string Leicester Tigers team, and they won that game. And they weren't particularly convincing in that. So they've actually been poor for quite a while. When it comes to putting your finger on it, I'm starting to think that maybe the Stormers got to a point where they started to believe their own press, which means people like me and you. I remember during the Betway SA20 cricket, there was a game, it must have been at Newlands, where some of the Stormers players were interviewed during the play. And at the time, the Stormers were unbeaten. And the way the guys were talking, it was almost as if the Stormers had won the competition already. And I remember thinking to myself, guys, you haven't actually won anything yet. I think at that stage they'd played 11 games in the season across all competitions, and they hadn't lost yet. But it was quite a long way. And then I sort of parked that thought. I remember thinking to myself, guys, you're getting ahead of yourselves. You're talking as if you've already won the competition. I remember Ruan Nell was in there. I think Neerling Fashi was there. I think Dion Ferry might have been there as well. They were all talking about how great Dobbo is as a coach and how everything was working. I just remember thinking to myself, you may be getting a bit ahead of yourselves. And maybe that's the case. Maybe there was a point in this season where they thought we've got this thing licked. And they didn't. But going to Sasha, Sasha does some things really well in a game. But I think Tony Brown, the Springbok assistant coach, might have fingered it this week. It's not just Sasha that's culpable. I think it's the team as a whole. I think Tony Brown said when he's at the Springboks that he's given a specific role, and he's got players around him who recognise a specific role. And I sometimes think that the problem with the Stormers is that the players in that side who think that Sasha's a genius and that he's always going to be a wizard and always do wizardry things. And then when he doesn't do it, they're a bit bereft. There's an interesting stat that I was thinking about, Kev. The best games the Stormers have played this season, the ones that they've won, the big games that they've won, away against Munster, away against Benetton, were all with Yuri Mati at fly half. And when the Stormers go onto the field with Yuri Mati as their number 10, I doubt very much they think, okay, give the ball to Yuri Mati. He's a magician and he'll win the game for us. But whereas when the Sasha's on the field, they sort of think, well, we've got this genius who can do so much. And I think that might actually, I'm starting to think that might be part of the problem. So I'm not fingering Sasha. I'm fingering there's a dynamic, and it got me. And when Tony Brown said it this week, I was at the Springbok press conference. When he said it this week, I started to think, well, maybe that vindicates something that I've sort of started to feel myself.
Yeah, look, I can't help, and I've seen it happen so much in professional sports, where someone gets a big paycheck, they sign a new contract, and they just don't live up to what is expected. I'm one of those guys. It's like, too much came too fast for him. The captaincy, and a massive contract. And when you get massive money, you're supposed to raise your game and take it to another level. I haven't seen. I've seen a frustrated Sasha. I've seen, a bit petulant at times. So I don't know. At the beginning of the year, I pegged the Stormers to be about a 500 team. Yeah. And they're certainly playing like that now. And I think their schedule gets a bit easier, but there's something not quite right there at the Stormers.
Yeah, well, I wrote at the weekend that they're a mid-table. They look like a mid-table team if you're actually lucky, if you're actually being complimentary.
Yeah. That said, Gav, I did say to you, if the Bulls destroy the Sharks, which they did, is that then is that then the Ackerman effect coming into the Bulls, because they look like the best team in South Africa right now.
Well, just to go back to Sasha very briefly, I don't think Sasha's guilty of not trying. I think personally that he tries too hard. I think he tries to do too much. He tries to do too much on his own, and I think that was what Tony Brown was saying, that he actually feels that he's got to do his work, the work for the people around him, and he wants to take on the whole other team by himself. So it's not like he's got a big contract and he thinks I've got the money now. It's not like some British football players, and there may be some players at the Sharks in the past who have coasted a bit, but I don't think that Sasha's guilty of that. I think that I think he's definitely trying and maybe over trying to go to the Sharks and the Bulls. Yes, I think that the Bulls have picked up momentum now, but at the same time, and you remember I sent you, because last week I said that I had a funny feeling the Sharks might win that game, and then later in the week the Sharks team came out. And the Sharks team was very weak. I mean, they didn't have their top player. They didn't have Siya Khaleesi. They didn't have Ethan Hooker. They didn't have Grant Williams. There were a couple of guys missing there. And I looked at that team and I thought, no, this is actually a Sharks team that's going to lose. So to me, like, again, the Bulls were always going to win that game. Once I saw that Sharks team, the Bulls were always going to win that game. And I'm not so sure that the Sharks beat the Stormers twice. At the end of January, and everybody looked at the Sharks and thought, okay, they must be brilliant because they beat the Stormers. But now, having seen the Stormers play against the Lions, we've got to sort of start questioning, well, how good are the Stormers? The Stormers got blown out of the water in that game in London, I think. I think when they went to the Stoop, they lost to the Harlequins, that knocked their confidence. Because it was just before that game that those guys were talking at the cricket and they were very confident and everything. And I think that they just suddenly realized that they're not quite where they thought they were, and that they've suffered a blow in confidence. And watching the game on Saturday at Ellis Park, I was watching a Stormers team that was low in confidence and didn't quite know what game plan they wanted to follow. And the Sharks beat that team. They beat that team twice. Then they announced that they were going to keep JP Peterson as their permanent head coach. And sometimes, and I think we've spoken about it in the show before, we've seen it in British football, sometimes you give something different to an interim manager than you give to a permanent coach. So things might have changed at the Sharks a bit now. I think that they were a little bit premature to sort of rush the permanent appointment of JP Peterson when they could have waited till the end of the season. It's not like Crusaders or Leinster or Glasgow Warriors are going to come cap in hand and ask JP Peterson to come and coach them. So it wasn't like he was going to go somewhere else. So they didn't need to rush. They didn't need to rush and say, JP Peterson needs to be our coach. To me, that was just typical Sharks poor management. And so to answer your question about Ackerman and the Bulls, they've picked up good momentum in the last couple of weeks. They beat the Lions very comprehensively, and now they've beaten the Sharks comprehensively. They look like they're going forward. Funnily enough, their big test might be next week when they play the Stormers, because the Stormers always raise their game against the Bulls. It's a funny thing, and the Bulls also sometimes the Stormers are their banana peel. So let's see what happens next week. Let's see how the Stormers get themselves together before then, because I think they've got a lot of work to do and they've got a lot of soul searching to do.
Yeah, I know it's a week out, but if I'm picking the winner for that, Sharks, Bulls easily.
But then we might as well not have a show next week. So let's not get too far ahead of ourselves.
No, okay. Well, let's get into the Six Nations. Some interesting games this week. There's one that I'm targeting. Let's talk Italy-England. I know England are still heavily favorites, but that's a game that Italy can win. That's a game they will be targeting. They've never beaten England. And I think I would have a small bet on Italy to beat England, because they just the formula's there. England have looked terrible. They lost to a declining Ireland team. They made Ireland look really good. There were so many mistakes in that game; it was embarrassing for England. I don't know where they.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you. Sorry, carry on.
No, go ahead.
I don't know if you've seen the England team, but they've made 12 changes this week. But some of those changes are good. I mean, Finn Smith coming in for George Ford at fly half, for instance, to me improves the England team. So
Yeah.
you say that I would take a small bet on Italy, and I would agree with that, but I would then sort of say the emphasis has to be a small, because
Yeah.
when you completely change your team up like that, when a team completely changes like England just have, you never really know what you're going to expect. And I'll use the example of the Springboks in Wellington last year. When the Springboks went on from Auckland, where they lost to the All Blacks in that very close game, and everybody was going down on the box, Russie made, I can't remember how many changes it was, but it was a completely new team and a much younger team that played the All Blacks in Wellington, and they won 43-10. And there was an excitement and a vibrancy about it. So what Steve Borthwick has done is shaken up his players by making these changes, and the guys who are coming in will be hungry. What the weakness of that England team is that, from what I understand, very few of those players at the back. He's changed the entire back line. I mean, the only guy who survives is Charlie Freeman, who's now moved from wing to outside centre. They've got a completely new back line, and apparently none of those units have played together. In other words, the midfield combinations never played together. So there's a huge sort of unknown factor about England. So I would also say that if the odds are good and you're going to get good money back for an Italy win, then definitely take a flutter on them, because they have to have a chance. They have to have a chance against an England team that's made so many changes. But when Borthwick's made that many changes, then you also, from that other perspective, can't be too sure of what you're going to get from England. You might actually get something very good.
Look, if you bet 100 rand on Italy, you'll get back 340.
Okay.
The handicap 7.5 in favor of England. I mean,
that's worth a flutter if you're going to do 100 rand, but not 100,000 rand. Yeah, I would agree.
I'll stay away from the 100,000 rand bet there.
Yeah.
But so, how do you see it happening? I mean, what the handicap 7.5. What do you think the score will be?
I think it'll be a close game. I do think it. I mean, I think it's going to be a close game. I don't think that Italy are any longer the team that gets done. I mean, I said that they would get done badly by France, which they were really. I mean, they lost by 25 points. But watching that game, Italy.
But not the 29.5 the bookies had.
Yeah, no, exactly. I wasn't going to go. I went higher. I went for a 30-point win. But Italy were actually a lot better in that game than the scoreline.
Yeah, and France had made a lot of changes, to that team.
Exactly. Which England have now done as well. They've made lots of changes as well. But the difference between France and England, obviously, is that France were at home. I mean, they played that game in Lille, whereas Italy have to travel to Rome. England have to travel to Rome. Italy have never beaten England, so they'd be super motivated for this game. And Italy are definitely on an upward curve. So I think if I was going to predict the winner of this game, I would say that I would give it to England, but I'd give it by a narrow margin. I would sort of say less than 7.
Yeah, I will say that the less than 8, 7.5. It's the handicap. I'll be putting down 1,000 rand on Italy, and I wouldn't surprise me, and I'll put a couple hundred on them winning outright, and cheering like a motherfucker, because I hate the English. It's like I'll cheer for Italy in that game.
It would be great to see them lose 3 in a row.
Oh, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be.
The next world champions, the team with the best tight 3 in the world. All the things we read after they beat New Zealand. Come on.
Well, they're the Stormers in a way, aren't they? I mean, the Stormers have just lost 3 in a row, and we all thought the Stormers were the next best thing because they'd won 11 in a row, and now they've lost 4 and 5, and suddenly they're looking like England, and England also believe their own press. So maybe there's some sort of like correlation between those teams we've discussed on the show.
Quite possibly, and that's the game of the weekend for me. I know you're thinking Scotland, France. Let's get on to that now. Scotland host France. Can Scotland slow them down? Can they stop the triple crown, the Grand Slam?
Scotland have a good record against France for some reason. They have shocked them periodically over the years, and some of their games, even when they've lost, have been competitive. I don't know if it was last season or the season before where Scotland actually should have won. I remember the referee made a bad call right at the end of the game, where Scotland looked like they dotted the ball down to win the game. So Scotland, I certainly wouldn't write off Scotland in this game, but I just think
No.
that France have developed so much. I just think that they've. Yes, I know Scotland beat England at Murrayfield and actually outplayed England, but I just think that the French are getting it together now. And while I don't think that it's going to be a big runaway win for France, I'd be very surprised if they lost.
Yeah, the handicap is 10.5.
10.5. Yeah, I can see France winning this game by let's say between 8 and 12 points. So it's quite close to that.
Yeah, it's right in the middle. Yeah,
it's right in the middle. Yeah. I think that's. Look, Scotland have something to play for. They haven't won. They haven't won the Six Nations in the Six Nations era. They haven't won the. Okay, well, you're not going for the Triple Crown, and they can't go for the Grand Slam because they've already lost to Italy. But if they win this game, their last game of the competition is they're basically playing for the Six Nations title. So it's a massive game for Scotland, and I've been reading the Scottish press this week, and there's a lot of positivity going on there. They've won 2 in a row. They weren't that flush against Wales last time out, but they were very good against England before that. So it's going to be a great game. I do think that's going to be the game of the weekend. I just again, I mean, it sounds like I'm sitting on the fence, but I don't know if I would bet on a Scotland win. Well, I won't.
no.
I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be what you said. What we said. It's going to be between 8 and 12 points victory to France.
Yeah, the 10.5 puts me off, especially with Scotland at home.
Yeah.
So I won't be betting on the game. My thoughts are that France will win by less than 11.
Yeah.
So it's a game for me to avoid. There's money to be made elsewhere out there.
The one thing about France, Kevin, is that I still sort of like to see their temperament tested. Because France, they have this reputation that goes back a long way, like over decades, for being a little bit temperamentally vulnerable at times. And the one thing Scotland have done to other teams in recent, even that game. It was the previous game against the All Blacks, but even the game against the All Blacks in November, they came back, remember? And they came back and they tested the All Blacks. And the All Blacks had the temperament to hold on and then go on and win quite comfortably in the end. If Scotland do what they did to England by taking an early lead, and if they do what they did to New Zealand by coming back like they did, then I'm not sure. And actually, remember the Argentina game? Remember the Argentina game where Scotland were a long way ahead, and then Argentina came back and won. I'm not sure. It'll be interesting to see if Scotland do that, what they did against England and Argentina. If they have a really good start, it'll be interesting to see how France reacts and how they come back. That would be a good test for Scotland for France. But otherwise, I see it as a France win.
Yeah, and again, it's all self-promoting to France versus South Africa that everybody wants to see, or not everyone, but the English people. A lot of pundits are saying it'd be great for France to beat South Africa. It'd be good for world rugby.
Yeah.
I don't see that happening. I mean, we hammered them the last time we played, and it's one of those tricky situations from a bettor. The 10.5 is a tricky handicap, because Scotland could score a late point, a late try or a late something to take. They could be losing by 16, and Scotland score a late try. It'll take it under the handicap.
Exactly. Or alternatively, it could be a close game up to a certain point, and then France win it in the end. I can see that happening as well. I can see Scotland putting in a really great first half, and that's why I say that's when France will be tested. But I just think the French team is now too good, and you say that they can't beat South Africa. I'll tell you one thing: is that I just feel that French team is evolving. It's evolving very well, but their forwards, I mean, their scrum hasn't really cooked in the Six Nations, so. There
I,
areas. Sorry.
I agree with that analysis. They are an evolving team, but the one thing that we forget all the time when we talk about other teams is South Africa's evolving too.
True.
You know, they're not staying packed. They seem to evolve all the time. So yeah, it's an evolution versus a steroid evolution in terms of the way that I see it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So then we have the worst game of the week. Then we have the worst game of the weekend. You know, got a woman getting paid close to £400,000 in charge of the biggest shambles in the world, who shows no sign of wanting to resign because she's getting paid too much money. Tierney, I'm referencing Tierney.
Yeah.
So people talked last week, Brave Wales, or 2 weeks ago, Brave Wales. You know, they almost won. We've got to remember that Scotland played its World Cup against England and left nothing out there on the field. They gave it their all.
Yeah.
So then they played Wales the following week, and there's always a digression or regression in when you put everything on the line and then you have a following game. That happens in every sport. So it didn't surprise me that Scotland weren't that they didn't absolutely hammer Wales. They should have. I mean, they were the better team. And Wales, yeah, they looked brave, but they lost again. That was a 19th loss under this woman. 2-19.
Yeah.
I just hope that next year we're not talking about Wales and they're 2-30, and she still has a job. This is beyond anything I've ever seen in my life in business, in sports. She's a disgrace. The people that are paying her are disgraceful and not changing that system. So Wales, Ireland. What do you think the point spread is? Let me just get it up for myself. I know.
So you're not asking me who's going to win?
No.
I think Wales will win by 20. No, Wales. Sorry, Kevin. I mean, Ireland will win by 20. I mean, Ireland will win by 20. So that was a bad one from me. I think Ireland will win by around 20. I think Ireland will be buzzing. Ireland will be buzzing after beating England. And unlike Scotland, who had to go to Cardiff a week after beating England, there's been a 2-week break now. The 2-week break for Ireland to prepare for this game, and I think that they'll be looking for another big performance to show that Twickenham wasn't a fluke. So I fully expect Ireland to win comfortably, and I wouldn't advise. I mean, I'm not going to go out there and say people should ruin their Friday night especially if you're a Welsh supporter, by watching the game, because the game is actually on Friday. And I know people like to do other things on a Friday night, other sometimes than watching rugby. But if you are going to watch it, I think you should be expecting Ireland to win by about 20. I don't know. What do you think, Kevin?
I hate to say this as a Welshman. I don't really care. It's I'll watch the first 10 minutes for the illusion that we may, but the handicap's 27, and there's a good reason it's 27. We'll lose by 20. We'll lose by 27 points. I think that's a bit rich, but and maybe with Ireland beating England again, you have that thing where Ireland left nothing on the field, and you might have that scenario where there's a bit of a regression for this week. But Wales aren't even quality enough to be in the Six Nations. They shouldn't be playing a team like Ireland. Ireland will beat them by 20 plus. You're right. I wouldn't even get into the betting. I mean, it could be a 50-point game.
It could be. Now, I'm not putting. Look, weather conditions and things like, I don't know what the weather's in Dublin, and sometimes these late night games can be less inclined to blow out scores. Although Ireland lost to France quite badly in a late night game. So I'm going 27. I think the bookies have it right. If they say 27 points, I think they've got it spot on.
Yeah, it's shameful, and it's sorry that Wales are in this way. And I apologize to every rugby fan out there that even watches the games. Wales, it's sad,
Well, let's put it this way: if they do well against Ireland, and then you have to couple it with last week's game, then maybe there is an indication that they're starting to come back. Because there were stages of that Scotland game where I thought they were very impressive. So, but I also took the attitude of you did. I expected Scotland to step back last week. I wouldn't have been completely surprised myself if Wales had actually won that game, just because it's Scotland's trend to beat England and then lose to somebody much smaller than England the following week.
You mean someone absolutely crap?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely crap. But Ireland aren't absolutely crap. I don't know if Ireland have. I don't know if the rumours of their demise were wrong, because I think I'd need to see Ireland back up with a couple of games before I'm completely convinced that, as I think we said last week, it's not like that last week that their game against England wasn't like the sting of the dying bee. But I certainly think that we saw enough in that game to suggest that Ireland aren't quite dead yet.
Yeah, look, it's there's no upside to anybody playing Wales right now.
Well, South Africa always organised these games at the end of the season or outside of the international window when both teams are weakened, and I always wonder why, because there isn't any merit in it. I mean, that game we saw in Cardiff in November at the end. It was a week after the international window had ended, and the Springboks won 73-0. Apart from poor Eben Etzebeth incident that it saw him get suspended for 3 months, which is probably good for him anyway, there wasn't really much positive to take out of that game, even though the Springboks won so well, because we knew how weak Wales were.
Yeah, that's true. So, recapping, bud, we've got Italy by 7.5. Underdogs by 7.5. I think that they'll come closer than that, and they may win it. I'd love to see them win it. I think that they're targeting this game. This is their World Cup. This is their World Cup, and heaven help England if they lose their third game in a row. Scotland will absolutely hammer Wales. Can't see any other result. Ireland will absolutely hammer Wales.
Yeah.
And Scotland plus 10.5 points. It's probably worth a little punt to take the 10.5 points on Scotland and have that handicap, because France I see winning, but not by a massive amount.
I agree. Their games have tended to be close in the last few years, so I do think that Scotland will push France on their home ground.
Yeah, I agree. So there you have it, folks. Next week it's good because we get it back into the URC, I think.
Well, we've got one game. We've got the derby between the Bulls and the Stormers. It's the following week that we properly back. Then we've got the full thing. But next week it's the Bulls against Stormers and Le Crunch, the big game in Paris, France against England. So so next week's going to be interesting too.
Like a good rugby week next week.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for those Welsh optimists out there, Italy.
Yes.
Wales hosting Italy in the Wooden Spoon, I suppose.
Wooden Spoon final. It used to be the Wooden Spoon final, but it'll only be the Wooden Spoon final if Italy lose to England, which they may not. So so we've got to for it to be a Wooden Spoon final, Wales have to hope that Italy lose on Saturday. It could be England, actually. It could be England who are trying to avoid the Wooden Spoon next week.
Well, let's hope that. I think from a points difference, Wales have owned that, in terms of the beatings they've taken.
That's true.
But Gab, thanks for coming in, and sorry I'm not there.
No problem.
Took a sleeping tablet last night and slept through till 11 o'clock. So I'll feel fresh when the effects wear off. But always a pleasure chatting to you, and make every bet a winning bet, and bet responsibly. And I'll see you next week, man.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Gav.
Cheers, Kev.
Cheers, bud.